So, welcome back to Healthy Hearts, Healthy Minds. Today we're talking about a topic that sometimes is not talked about a lot in church, and that is we're talking about sexual addiction. I have with me Terri, and I'm just so grateful, Terri, that you're willing to share so personally around your experience that you've had with this. So I'm actually going to be very quiet if I can. You know, friends say I talk all the time and it's hard for me to be quiet, but I'm going to actually try to do that and just let you share your story with us.
Okay. I have been married for 25 years, and my husband is, I just want to say, aware that I have conversations like this, so I want to make sure everybody understands that. I have 4 beautiful boys, and they are all over 20, so they're grown, and we just had what I thought was the perfect family. And my husband and I were leaders in the church, and we taught leadership. As a matter of fact, we taught leadership to the pastors and pastoral staff and the leadership team. And we both had our own ministries and own jobs, and so I felt like for the majority of our marriage that we were very happy. In the last 3 or 4 years, I knew that something was happening, and what I thought was happening was that he was having a midlife crisis, and that this was how the midlife crisis played out in him. He just became different and kind of detached and more almost borderline verbally abusive, and things started happening. But I was of the mindset that, you know, we were one in Christ, we were married, this was just the way it was going to be, and until he passed through this stage. That's where my mind was during this time. It wasn't an easy time, but it was a time where I thought it was going to pass. During that time, my spiritual disciplines became stronger, and I geared up in some areas, mainly because of what I was feeling was happening and what I was looking at in myself. What's causing this? Am I doing something? So it's caused me to do some confession and some other things. So I was checking myself, I guess, during this time.
Now, for those who aren't aware of what spiritual disciplines are, could you just say that?
Yeah, for me, what spiritual disciplines are in my life is just starting out in prayer, making space in my life for listening to God, and then I would do extended prayer time where I would mark off a day in my calendar where I would spend the whole day with God. And so these were just times that, other than just my normal quiet time that I'd have, that would bring me closer to God and bring me more in His presence, and I'd spend more time in that. So it was just creating space in my life to really hear from God. That's what I'm calling, that was what spiritual disciplines I was doing at that time.
Yep.
So that's what was happening when I basically got the news from my husband that he disclosed that he was having an affair at the time. Then he went on to disclose that he had had multiple affairs and was addicted to pornography. Now, this was on one particular evening that you could have knocked me over with a feather. I mean, I had no idea this was coming. I did not see this. Been married 24 years at that time. Would have never guessed that. Would have guessed a lot of things, but never have guessed that. And so it was a big shock to me that night to hear that. What has transpired since then is that we live separately. It's been 2 years now. We've had multiple conversations with our boys. I've been very honest in what I'm feeling and what I'm going through. They understand that. My husband he goes to a support group. He has a regular counselor, and he has an accountability partner that he sees every week. So he made the decision at that time to, he didn't want to end the marriage. He wanted to invest and get himself healthy and move forward. My first response was, there needs to be more space here. We need time to figure this out. So that was what led up to the next 2 years, was again creating that space so that I could hear from God and know what my next steps were. Okay, so since then, or during that time, there were some things that I just want to be real honest and say that the church did that were not necessarily positive for me, or I did not agree with. And I will be the first to say that growing up, I grew up in a denomination that really preached against divorce, and that there left very, very small amount of room for even the idea of getting a divorce or separation, and didn't encourage separation at all. So I grew up in that, and so my mindset, I never thought that I would be one to actually be the one to step forward in divorce, whether or not it was something I did or not. I just thought I would just live in that until this happened. And when this happened, it challenged everything that I had thought I believed about marriage and staying together and what God says about that and what the Bible says. It challenged that. And I spent a lot more time reading that. What happened with my situation in the church is that I was, three things were basically were giving to me in counseling from our pastor. One was to keep quiet and not, that either my husband or myself should not share this with anyone, with our parents or anyone, that this was just to be between ourselves. The second one was that we were to counsel to begin marriage counseling together, that it was not something that we should do individually. This was meant to, we were counseled to be counseled together. And then the third thing was, now I'm blanking on what the third thing was. To not live separately, to stay together during this time, because separation leads to the ability to, you start getting comfortable in that, and then it's easier to get divorced. So stay together, go through marriage counseling, and don't tell anyone. And all three of those things I disagreed with in our particular situation. And I'm not sharing all the details of what I've been through, but I will tell you it was long lasting, and it was very habitual and compartmentalized, and a lot of things to where it was a severe addiction. It wasn't just one time looking at pornography and one affair, multiple over a long time. So because of that, it made me look at things a little differently.
And my understanding is from Scripture there is one grounds for divorce.
Yes.
And that is the case of adultery.
Yeah, and it was a clear case of adultery and he was confessing. Now he was caught in it, and that's why he was confessing. My son had actually overheard a conversation that made he said, either you tell her or I will. So that's how I found out. So he didn't just have a conscious decision to come tell me. He told me because he was caught. So the thought of us going to marriage counseling together, when it was a clear addiction on his end, just did not feel right to me, and I wouldn't receive that, and therefore was not received well by the church, that I chose to confront my pastor on that. I said, he's having an addiction issue. This isn't a marriage issue, and I will not take that shame on. And he needs to get himself healed and go through the proper channels of professionals that know what they're dealing with in his case. I don't have those issues. Those issues are not, have nothing to do with me. So that was the first thing that I combated and wasn't well received. And the other one was not to tell everybody, because I needed my mom to know. I needed my close friends around me to know. I needed to have a support group, and it just became those who I couldn't tell. It wasn't easy for me to be around them because I didn't want to lie.
And I guess that sense of betrayal would have been so huge that to not be able to actually share with your mum would have been,
And for me, my relationship with my mom was good, and she wasn't, there can be some circumstances around that. I mean, she wasn't sick, and our relationship was good. Those factors have to be thought through, but I had a healthy mom. We had a healthy relationship. She needed to know, and I believe his parents needed to know, and he did share with them. He agreed with me in that case, and he decided that yes, we need to tell some people, and not too many, because I understand the danger in that. And then the living together and staying together, it just was not the right thing for us, and I still stand by that. Today we are still living apart, and we're not divorced, and we're still working through some things. But the separation has helped me tremendously to move on and do what God has called me to do in my life, and not have to daily face the situation. But also for him, he would sort of like win in that case. You know, if I was stayed there, what he would wanted was to have me there, and I would be there, and therefore he would eventually quit working so hard, because it would be just too easy for us just to fall back into that marriage relationship. And I was very wisely counseled to say by a friend of mine that said, no, he needs to know that he could lose you, and that he needs to work really hard to get you back. And again, I'm talking about this specific situation. So
Yeah.
I just felt like it was the best thing to do, and I was able to clearly move on, do some new things, be in a healthier state by living apart.
Mm. And in a sense, you're talking about setting healthy boundaries,
Yeah.
so that your husband knew that it wasn't okay to continue to live with you and to continue the addiction.
Right.
Because that's
Right.
really what that separation was about, from what I'm hearing.
Yeah, and now, even though we're not living together, we are friends. We do go out from time to time. We do have family things. Our boys are around us. They're comfortable around us now. We have open dialogue with our boys. I will say that now our boys are older, and I mentioned that. Different situation if they'd been younger. It would have been a different situation on how much we told them or how much we involved them in this, if they were not grown. So I want to make sure everybody knows that this they were grown boys. They needed to know the truth, and they heard the truth.
And
Plus,
you mentioned you didn't want them to follow
exactly.
the same.
That's exactly what I did not want. I wanted them to understand. You know, this could be a generational curse that they would have to deal with. This needed to be stopped. They needed to be aware of, oh my goodness, you know, this could happen to me. And what the outcome of that for two of my boys who lived together and were moving into a place right at this time of their own, they chose not to have internet in their home because of what the potential danger was, what they saw happen with my husband. And so
Wow, that's wonderful.
to this day, they don't have internet in their apartment. Now they go to the church, and they do things in their offices, and they have internet there where there's other people around. But they have made that choice. They've set that boundary for themselves because of what they saw happen from this. So I believe that God stopped something. I believe actually judgment came down, and that God stopped something from what could have affected. And I say my three boys here. I've got one adopted boy in Belize, and I'm not so familiar with what's happening in his life right now. But the three that are here, they are. It has been an awakening for them, and they have put measures in their life to make sure this doesn't happen to them, or to help that it doesn't happen to them.
Is there anything else you think it's really important for people to know about sexual addiction, Terri? You know, the shame that you talked about, or any of those other things?
One thing I would say to any woman that's facing this is, it is not your shame, and don't take that on. You may not be the best wife, and I had to look at that for myself. I did a lot of things wrong, and I wasn't the best. There's a lot of things that I wasn't the best of. I could fill in that blank. But I did nothing to cause this or to play any part in this. And so I refused to take that shame on. And then I just listened to the Lord and what He had for me, and not what others said, because it's a confusing issue in a lot of people's eyes, and Christians will take both. You'll hear both sides. I've got strong Christian friends of mine that look at me and say, how could you're the one that left, because I'm actually the one that did leave in the separation, and you're the one that ran away, and then I've got other people on the other side say, what in the world took you so long? You know, you should have left a long time ago. And you have both extremes, godly people that see this differently. So only God, only God. And there's a verse in Lamentations, and I don't remember right now, I think it might be chapter 3, but it says in the Message, it talks about when trouble comes, to get alone with God, bow down before Him in prayer, and what seems like the worst is really not the worst. And that verse put things in perspective for me, and to know that it's Him I go to. I needed to create that space for Him at that time. I needed to bow down And I needed him to tell me, you will get through this. This is not the worst. And I would say that to anybody, to create that space in your life to where you can truly have that time to think and pray and hear from God what he has for you, not what others tell you.
That's great. That's really good. Thank you so much, Terri. It's such a difficult area for people to talk about because of the shame and because it's so hidden. And yet it seems to be so common. You know, the statistics I've read on pornography in Christian homes and churches is quite horrific. So, you know,
And can I
love
add something?
getting the protection. The son's got the protection. You know, there's a great website called Covenant Eyes, some really helpful information. And I just really encourage people, just take the shame out of it and just come before God and just ask for his help, because he wants to heal you if this is something that you're struggling with.
Absolutely. And that is something that my husband got on his computer, Covenant Eyes, and his accountability partner, and he gave the codes to me too, to be able to see that. But it is an issue that probably over half the church's population is filled with men and women that are in some form of this addiction. And it's hard to draw the line on, you know, what is considered an addiction or what is truly considered porn these days. There's a lot of things on TV I would consider porn that other people don't. So that's a really hard thing, and I think that's why it's hard to talk about within churches. But it's out there, it's happening. Women are dying on the inside because they feel like they don't have a voice, and it's shameful. It's just it's like anything else, adversity, betrayal, those things. You just stick with God. He's going to get you through it. Be in a good situation. I think that's why I brought in the beginning with this spiritual disciplines. I was in a good place when this happened. God was preparing me. He knew that I was fixing to go through this, and I needed that. And pay attention to that, what God's doing in your life, and be ready. We always need to be ready.
You can't place having that solid relationship with God to be the thing. You know, to wait for the storm to come, it's
right.
too late.
That's exactly right.
You need that foundation in place, so when the storm comes, it doesn't rock you, but you're actually able to hear God in the storm. So again, thank you. This is such a personal experience. So thank you for sharing your experience, and I really pray that this is beneficial and helpful to many of you. God bless you.